Good morning. Today is November 21st. It's a Wednesday. It's 8:47 a.m. here on the Pacific coast of Washington State in the midst of a rather serious rainstorm. We've had like 6 inches of rain in 4 days, I think, here in the notoriously wet place south of us, Potlatch and the Skokomish River. Already flooded so much they can't tell whether the water's coming down or up. So it's kind of moot. But the Skokomish River is just notorious. That part of Mason County, it's glorious, it's beautiful. It floods constantly, so the silt is always redistributed. It's great farmland, but it's frequently underwater. Anyway, this is a Wujo that ultimately will get around to discussing the world citizen stuff that I posted the other day. Part of this little planned effort of mine for Wujos and interviews and stuff about this subject. Very unusual for me. Planning like that. Let's talk about some errata at the moment. And we have Kathy's health. She's doing very much better. I'm very encouraged. We're seeing real progress in a very short period of time. It is my conclusion that the heart problem she suffered was directly related to the psychiatric chemicals that she'd been taking and its effect on the body. A lot of these things have, just as an aside, a lot of these psychiatric chemicals I've done some serious research into, and they do weird things. They, for instance, work through the fat cells or the GABA part of the brain, or they deal with the adrenal hormones and this kind of thing. So they all have some level of side effect. It's well known. And in fact, most of these drugs you have to live through the side effects to see any kind of benefit. So I don't really classify them as a drug. They're a condition-causing chemical. You could get the same effect if you were exposed to these chemicals in the sense of air pollution from a local factory. These chemicals, the side effects that they create are often physical in the sense of physics. They alter the physics of the and mechanics, if you will, of how the body has to deal with itself. So when they say actually, and if you read the literature, frequently you hear the word think. We think it works on the GABA part of the brain. We think it works with the adrenal hormones, or an end all of this. It's really basically they don't really have a flippin' clue that they're willing to talk about. And also they lie consistently. If you go and you read the abstracts off of any of these chemicals, any of the major drugs, Prozac, Zoloft, any of them, go read the abstracts for the basic chemical that was pushed to the FDA. And you'll see that the abstract is a political document with an agenda. Just look at the language. It doesn't relate to the study underlying it. It is a sales effort. It is strictly a marketing tool and nothing else. They are pushing a position and that's it. They're not presenting you with factual evidence of their studies and the results. Once you get into the factual evidence of their studies and results, you find out that they lie consistently in the abstract and that they're a bunch of fucktards. So, anyway, on to other things. Kathy is doing better. We're over that hurdle, and we're going to take them on in other ways. The big pharma and these guys. Speaking of, it's unusual for me in planning. One of the things I do is I see patterns. I can't help it. I don't know if I was born with it or I grew into it or whatever, but I see patterns consistently in things and so on. It's a different order of thinking. You don't really deal with individual. You deal with individual details continuously, and then you just sort of rack them up, and there's this accumulator in your brain that says, "Oops, hey, you've seen enough details to project a pattern here. If you get three or four more, you're going to be for sure about it." So that actually is what accounts for my own, or for people's perception of my erraticness, and that is because I don't like being predictable in my own behavior because I bore myself. So I like new stuff all the time. Anyway, so couple of things here. I had been tasked with a question as to how and why I was giving a crap about world citizenship when the end of the world is nigh. And this is a legitimate question, and it is one that I wrestle with continuously because we find ourselves having to live in two worlds. The end of the world, the end of our world as we know it, TEOTWAWKI, is indeed within months. But nonetheless, we have to live through those intervening months. And I'm not just going to sit there and wait for it to occur. I take this as a really good opportunity to go out and basically cause a whole lot of problems for those people that have annoyed me. One of our family mottos goes to the idea that I am a dog who sits alone, I chew my bone in my repose. Day will come, which is not yet, when I will bite him by whom I'm bit. Rather nasty little motto, but, it works. So I'm out there causing problems where I think that these problems will aid others. And it's, we won't go into any of the motivations and so forth there, but it does sort of work. So this dual think is very difficult. We have to plan for the end of the world. We have to plan for the government not being here when the crises begin and happen, as they've demonstrated. I mean, where the hell was anybody in Sandy, where the hell was FEMA afterwards? It was up to the individuals, the people, to take care of themselves. And through the Occupy Sandy and other efforts, they demonstrated their capability and they got shit done. What does FEMA do? FEMA comes in and says everything must stop until paperwork is done. And that sort of brings us back to my original subject here, this whole idea of world citizenship. Why do we care? Well, let's stop for a second and continue with the idea of the end of the world. Let's just get this subject over with, because there's a few things to note here. The end of the world and time are not a fixed event. In other words, we're not sitting on a volcano, unable to flee from that volcano, watching the volcano swell and get ready to erupt with sure and certain knowledge that it will erupt and kill us in our lifetimes. This is not that situation. Basically, what we have is a shift from a known period of humanity's existence into a great period of unknowns. There is a huge risk at this point. There has been since the development of the atomic bomb, but that's a separate issue. But there's a huge risk at this point of the non-survival of our species. We're seeing species go extinct all around us, and there's no reason that we can think that we wouldn't also be a victim, except that we're a little bit smarter than some of these other species that are going extinct, and we have the advantage of technology, which allows us to somewhat modify our environment to some degree. And that is the issue. Will we have the ability to modify our environment to the degree that allows us to survive as a species? That is what remains unknown. From the remote viewing work of Courtney Brown, and from the remote viewing work of the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild, and from the remote viewing work of this particular outfit that wishes to remain unnamed, that kindly also offered their services, we have a view of June 1 of next year where a series of, at least one catastrophe has occurred that was significant to the planet as a whole and significant to humanity as a whole. We're suspecting, from the work that I've done with our WebBot stuff here these past, 20 years? Whew, almost 20 years. 20 years as of 2013. Within that work, we have a descriptor that we call the global coastal event. The global coastal event, by its definition, is global. Not instantaneous for everybody. And which I can get into later if there's really any question about that, but there's so much water it takes a while for it to slosh all the way around the planet, so people in Finland are not going to be affected at the same time as people in Australia or Africa, nor to the same degree. This is not ubiquitous, but it is a global coastal event, and it will impact humanity as a whole. If we look at the significance of it being coastal, we can say that likely something close to 95% of humanity will be impacted at a personal level, whether they are swept by waves or not, because most people and the services of our planet are coastal based. So even if you're inland, and you were totally untouched by the event itself, and you didn't get washed away by all the rain and the water and stuff that's going to be thrown into the air, you will nonetheless be personally impacted because probably 80-90% of the stuff that you need and use in some way comes from a coastal area. So this is going to be truly a planet affecting and species affecting for us, a humanity affecting event period. This period is unknown. We don't know how long it's going to last. We know that it is related to the greater scheme in which our solar system is involved, and therefore is likely to last multiple generations, simply because this is at a scale much larger than ourselves. So within this event, there is no sure and certain outcome for anybody. There's a whole series of range of potentials that will at some point, those potentials will slip into probabilities. In a mathematical sense, this can be predicted at any given point for the groups involved, and it's kind of moot. At some point, you will find that the potential for a major storm impacting you has become a probability, and then that probability shifts into a certainty, and then you've been through that experience. That does not mean you are done with the total experience that we're all going to be going through over these next few years. Our data sets run through to June of next year. In terms of the remote viewing, etc. Within our personal data here at Half Past Human, those sets run to about May, and then our stuff starts crapping out. Or actually has totally crapped out at that point and is gone blank, as though the event has occurred before May and has disrupted things to the extent that the internet is no longer a viable means for us to do work. Now, it doesn't mean the internet is totally shut down, but it may mean that there's just not enough volume that our WebBot stuff could predict itself being able to run. Make sense? So, under those circumstances, here we have the end of the world is nigh kind of thing, and yet at the same time we have to deal with the reality that we're facing day to day. A bunch of fascist corporations running around trying to take over the planet and shove people into these little slave camps that they call nation states. They're no longer bothering to the prisons within the nation states and the FEMA camps are just to incarcerate the malcontents within the larger population, because the whole larger population is indeed incarcerated, totally encapsulated by the borders. Which brings us back to this issue. Now, one last thing on the end of the world. There's this fellow out there, Sean David Morton. He was gifted a manuscript that he fictionalized. He claims most of it is fact. There's no way of knowing how much is fact and how much is fiction, but there is enough collected information in this book of his, Sands of Time, that gives a suggestion that as part of basically what he did was he had run into contact with what I call the breakaway civilization, what a lot of people call the breakaway civilization. It's the shadow ops, it's the people that have been reverse engineering all the space alien crap, and they collectively around the planet more or less all work together, which again gets us back to the idea of world citizenship and so on. But anyway, in Sean's book, Sands of Time, there's this concept that there's actually a small group within the larger breakaway civilization that is, if you will, management for humanity as a whole. Not trying to tell you, where to go and when to eat lunch, but rather more or less trying to keep the species as a whole from being eliminated by all of the many threats that are facing us. So theoretically, if these guys knew that a volcano was going to go off and, wipe out 600,000 people, they may not do anything, but we don't know what their motivation is. Maybe they would do something because that particular volcano might wipe out people upon whom they are dependent, in the sense of they need the electronic facilities, or electronics being produced at certain facilities in the range of that volcano. Nonetheless, though, they would go on in and alter the facts. They may come in and use their superior technology to bleed off some of the magma, that kind of thing. And that at least is the operational theory. Now, let's get to the remote viewing part of this. The remote viewing part of this, from Courtney Brown's work and from my validation studies that I had done, I didn't do them, but I had them commissioned, if you will. All of these show that after the event that we go through as what we'll call the Stage 1 Global Coastal Event, after we go through that, government is nowhere to be seen. Now, this should not surprise us. Where is government in Sandy? Where is government in Katrina? It's just not around. But this is something of a global blanketing kind of an effect. There appears to be no government out offering help anywhere after these events. So there's a whole lot of speculation that can be done about why that is the case. Did they all go into their underground bunkers and refuse to come out because they know there's something else coming? Because also, by the way, the remote viewing in no way goes past June 1 and in no way speaks to any further or greater catastrophes that may be awaiting us. It merely discusses this first set of parameters that we have to go through in 2013. So, if government's not around anywhere, it could be that they've gone into their hidey holes and they're simply not coming out, but they're there. Could be they've gone into their hiding holes and can't come out because of the earth changes, smashing their doors or whatever. Could be that they don't come out because they suspect there's a really nasty alien race about to come on down and suck up all the human flesh that's on the planet. Now, this is in the Sands of Time book. I'm paraphrasing. But these guys, according to the material that Sean wrote, are indeed very much afraid of